Hello, welcome to Bertie's Beads, business that's equally as happy online and in the real world. Here we have the first one of our bead boxes. It's called the Winter Collection and it comes complete with a set of instructions, but we're also doing a video to give you an idea of the key points. And here are the items that will allow you to make the first 5 makes and have plenty of extra items. This is the first one of the makes. It's using elastic and will include a reef knot. You can see the final make here. This is a mixture of the pattern that we decided to do, but you can alter it because you can see you've got all of these beads. So what you just do is you just thread on one of each of the beads into whatever pattern that you want to repeat, and this particular one, the bead hole is a little bit smaller, but it does go through. So here we are. This is the pattern that I've chosen to use, but of course you could use other different patterns, and you continue that until it's a desired length. When you've got the beads to the desired length and you check round your wrist or someone suitably sized for the actual person who it's going to be a gift for, then what you need to do is a reef knot. Now a reef knot, and it will be with the elastic, is right over left and twist under, and then left over right and twist under. And there you can see that both of the pink pieces of cord come out on top and the blue ones are both over there, and it can pull tight. And what we'll do is we will do the same with the actual bracelet. We will do right over left and pull, and then left over right and pull. Now this won't actually seal it off properly, particularly not, as you can see. I'll undo that and start again. You can see things don't always go perfectly, so we'll have right over left and then left over right and twist under and pull tight. Now this knot with this elastic will actually come undone. So what we just do is we just add a drop of super glue to seal the knot. It's very important. This isn't a children's kit. The children don't actually play around with super glue. In fact, at the workshop we've had a fair few incidents where a fair few people shouldn't play around with super glue. It does stick fingers and various items together, and what you just need to do is leave that for a minute or two to dry and then cut off the ends. Also, if you see there, I'm making sure the beads either side can move. This is the second make. It involves tiger tail, crimp beads, a link, a toggle clasp and some beads, and again you can make it to your desired length. The key idea here is how to actually crimp the crimp beads. Now there are several ways of doing this. What I tend to do is I would put a crimp bead onto the tiger tail wire, and I would thread the tiger tail back through the crimp bead. Now I wouldn't take it up tight because you need some flexibility of movement, and I would just crimp it once, but sometimes people crimp it the other way and there are various tools. The next thing is to thread the beads on in your desired pattern. Now this may take more than one effort, because if you want to get a nice matching side either side of the link, I've decided to do this pattern and it fitted quite nicely on me on 2 ways through. So one of the repeating patterns looks like this. The next thing you have to do is thread the tiger tail wire back through a few of the beads. You might have to do this at the end, but it hides the end, and then you thread the beads to the desired length. When you've got it to your desired length, you can then pick up another little crimp bead, and sometimes these pick up easier than others, and if it does come off the other end you can re-thread it. You go through the link and you go back through the crimp bead, which is now the wrong side of the link, and you can pull that up. Now I most probably wouldn't advise sealing this crimp bead off until everything is in place. I now can't see to thread that through at least one more bead. There we are. If you see there, it will hold in place, and then what you do is you repeat the other side. Once you have repeated the pattern with the other side and placed the crimps, you check the dimensions around your wrist or someone of a suitable size for whoever it is, and then what you do is you crimp off the crimp beads and cut off any excess wire. And this, I must admit, is one of my favourite makes. You start with the lobster clasp, and these have got sealed jump rings so that the tiger tail wire doesn't come off. We thread it through for the crimp bead like before, and we thread it back through, and we crimp. This time I've just used flat nose pliers because I couldn't, smooth nose ones because I couldn't find the flat nose ones. Now this time I decided, because we've got these little silver beads, to hide it in a crimp bead. So what you do is you put the crimp bead around the crimp bead cover, around the crimp bead, and you just squash into place. Right. Now I must admit, this is my favourite make, and this is Mark 2 of the video. So what you have to do is firstly you put the crimp bead on the tiger tail wire, and you feed it through the sealed jump ring at the top toggle and clasp, and this time you go about halfway down the length of the wire, which I used a good kind of arm span so I didn't have to worry, but you can judge by how long you want to make the necklace, and you thread the crimp bead or the tiger tail wire back through the crimp bead. Now I've got a kink in the wire, so what I'm just going to do is cut it off and thread that through. Right, now remember, we want the tiger tail wire to be roughly split in half lengthways, so which way? So I'll just feed it through a bit more there. There we are. And now we can crimp that off, cover it with the crimp bead cover, which will now not go on smoothly. If things go to plan, you can just sit it in there, but I'm all fingers and thumbs at the moment. And we're aiming for this video to take 10 minutes, which we know we're going to be over, but I think it's going to be a bit longer now. There we are, and you just close that, and that's not quite hidden the crimp bead because it's there. So we will have another go with another crimp bead. If nothing else, this shows you things don't go perfectly all the time. Right, I'm holding it in place. Oh, and it's dropped off this time. Oh God. It's going to be our own unique way of video making. There we are, and we've got it on there now. The next thing we do is the pattern. Now the pattern's going to be a repeating pattern. If you look there, I started with a big bead and I chose these ones out of the set, and then you take both pieces of wire and you feed them through one of the little silver beads. There we are. This is a clever bit of this pattern, and it looks very good with all manner of different beads. And then you repeat, and I've chosen to use a flower. And then another little silver bead. What can also make things easier for you is if you have both bits of tiger tail the same length. It makes it a lot easier to thread through. Mine should be, but I just pulled them together unevenly. So there we are. You can see the pattern is starting to form, and what you do is you repeat that pattern to the desired length. When you get to the desired length, what you do is you thread both pieces of tiger tail wire through a crimp bead and you squash it, making sure it's nice and secure. And then what you do is you cut off one of the pieces of tiger tail wire, and you then find another crimp bead, because what you're going to need to do is go through the other end of the lobster clasp. So you find another crimp bead, you go through the other sealed jump ring, and you bring that up. Whoops. Whoops. I've gone and had the crimp bead come up too far. There we are, it's gone back through. And you have it go back through that crimp bead. Now what you need to do with this particular crimp bead, and I haven't made a full size one this time, is you have to bring it up so it is right next to the other one, because what you're going to do is you're going to cover both of them with a crimp bead. So when they're nice and close, you then squash, hope it's fully secure, cut off the excess, find a crimp bead cover. That's one that I've sealed off. We will just find one. And what you do is you put both of the crimp beads in the crimp bead cover, which is a tight fit, or at least one of them, and you squash it, and that gives you the finish there. So that's make number 3 finished. Right, with this next make, the key is to get all the distancing right, and you'll have to decide that from where you want the beads to actually sit. These are a semi-precious gemstone called agate, and these are dyed agates. What you'd mostly need to do as well is lay the beads out to see quite what colour combination that you like. And now I'll start off with this central little bit, and I will thread those beads on in order, or I will when I can see the hole for the bead. And when I've threaded these on and got it in the centre of the wire, what I will then do is crimp bead either side to hold it in place. So what we're doing is we're using the crimp beads in this case to hold some beads so they look like they're floating in between or on the wire. What you can do, some people do decide to put bead covers on them, but I felt it made things look more visible down this end. So we've got the central little bit there, and each one of these agate kind of bead stroke pendants, the large ones, are slightly different. You thread on the crimp bead and you squash into place, bring it up tight the other side, and repeat. What you then do once you've got that little pattern in place is you thread on another crimp bead, you squash it so it stays in place, you thread on the other little series of agate beads. We're commenting, I don't normally actually shake with jewellery making, and I am used to being on camera because I'm on camera every day on my events page showing different items that we have for sale, but for some reason today I seem to have got the shakes. Oh, and my crimp bead didn't crimp. So all that's happened is it's just kind of floated down like a floating bead. So what I will do is I will have another go at squashing it with a bit more force, and let's see if that, there we are, it's well and truly in place. And what I'll just do is, now I've got those beads in place, I'll put another one on, that side, and crimp to hold it in place. And you can see, you can barely see the crimps there. Now the next thing you have to do is you have to match it up, and what I would mostly suggest, if you're sensible, is a ruler, get the crimp bead in place and then crimp it. But I have a habit of doing things by eye, so let's have a, oops, it's not going to be down there. There we are. And then you thread on the other beads. So when you've threaded on the other half to match, you then pop the crimp on and crimp it into place, and then you decide on the length you want for the last larger agate beads. You put another crimp bead on, and this will allow the agate bead to appear to float. This time we'll make sure it doesn't move. We'll get the larger agate bead, oops, we will find the disappearing holes. All these have come off of strands, so we know they do have holes, it's just whether or not I can see them. And then you don't have to have a crimp on the top side of it, but it helps so things don't move around, because if you think gravity will do a certain amount, and then you repeat that the other side. When you've got both of the large agate beads in place, you then decide how much longer you want the necklace, and you put a crimp bead on each side. You squash it, you make sure it's secure, you cut off any excess length, and you then cover with a bead cover. You're doing the same both sides, we're just showing you on one time because we're mindful of how long the video is and me dropping everything. Mind you, you can see even with the dropping things you can get things done ish. Alright, so there we are, finally got it in place, and now I can't, and you bring the two sides together, ideally a little bit neater than me, and there you have the crimp bead cover on that end, and you repeat the other side and you end up with a clasp like that. Hello, this is the final little make for this box that I've led you through. There'll be plenty left for you to come up with your own designs. There's also things like earring hooks and various other beads in there as well. Now for these little flowers, you can either use the longer bugle beads or the smaller ones. I did a mixture, some with 2 little ones and some with 1 big one. We'll do a big one to show you how to do it. Now these pins are called ball head pins because they've got a little ball at the end, but it makes a nice little finishing touch. You thread a bugle bead on there, either 1 large or 2 small ones, and then you feed that through the plastic flower bead. Now you have a choice here. There are things called loppers, and they will be available on my events page, on my website and my Etsy, and they can lop this down to a loop. But if you haven't got loppers, the way to do it is to cut it down a little bit shorter, find some smooth nose pliers. In fact, that's still a little bit long. Right, and what you do is you bend things round the smooth nose pliers, and then you bend back, and the bending back action lines it up. So there we are, you can see there the little loop. And what you do is you repeat that for however many times you want for your little cluster of flowers. On this occasion I am just doing this one, and I will grab myself a little piece of wire to just show you how to do it. And what I did when I had the little cluster of flowers is I just did a little knot to hold it in place, and it held all 3 there. And then what I did was I threaded the beads on with a small bugle bead, a little blue bead, a longer one, little white one, bigger white one, little white one, and I repeated to the desired length. And then what I did at this end was doing the skill that you've seen a lot through this video. I got a crimp bead, I threaded it on, I put it through the seal jump ring, and I threaded it back through the crimp bead and a few beads, and then I just squashed it. Thank you for watching this video showing some makes for the winter collection.